Welcome to the Happy 365 podcast. This is the show where we unpack all things employment law, professional coaching and company wellbeing. And we ask, how do you have happy, shiny people? I'm Louise Otton, the Executive Performance and Wellbeing Coach at Law 365.
And I'm Megan O'Hara. I'm the Partner in Employment Law at Law 365.
And I'm Elliot Burton, and I'm the Paralegal here at Law 365.
So we all work together, as you can hear, Law 365. We specialise in the needs of Microsoft partners. We cover commercial contracts, we do employment law, we do coaching, cover the whole gamut. But our mission is to help Microsoft partners grow with less risk.
In the last episode, we looked at some of the biggest issues that Microsoft partners are facing right now, and that includes attracting and retaining talent. And we also looked at the fact that cash isn't necessarily king, and that well-being is the number one factor that employees are looking for in the workplace. And we also discovered that employers are doing everything they can to keep their staff happy, motivated, and to keep them stay engaged and connected to the business.
Yep. So this week we're asking the question, why should we care about having happy people in the workplace?
Yeah, we're going to be really looking at some of the facts and figures around how having happy people in the workplace actually makes a difference. And we're just going to be exploring what that looks like. So our first topic really for today is to look at how does happiness and employment, go together? How do they complement each other?
Yeah.
And what effect does that then have on workplace culture, productivity, well-being levels, and general kind of work-life balance, which is what we've been seeing is an important desire of our employees these days. And we just wanted to talk about those main kind of topics that are coming out of that. So does being happy at work make you more productive?
Well,
Yeah.
I would say personally for me, when I'm happier in all areas of life, I generally do better. I mean, that's a pretty common thing to say.
I think you're absolutely right. You do. If you're happy, you're going to be just kind of more engaged, more interested, putting more into what you're doing, and what comes out is going to be better. And you're going to make people around you a lot happier as well.
Exactly.
Happy people. Elliot makes me very happy. He's in my team and he keeps me nice and happy. Yeah. So if you're happy, other people are happy, and it kind of works all the way around, doesn't it? It's kind of a circle again.
Yeah.
It's contagious, isn't it?
Contagious,
your emotions are contagious. So the more you can give out those good, positive, happy emotions, the more you're going to get them.
Yeah, that's so true.
Back.
When you're like at work and other people also are giving you good vibes and energy, and they're happy as well. That it's infectious, and that's how you grow. I suppose that's where you grow your office culture.
Definitely. And interestingly, I can't remember the exact figure here, but I think negativity is 3 times more contagious than happiness.
Oh, is
so
it?
if you're around, a culture that's maybe toxic and not
a
good positive place to be, it's much more damaging and contagious. The effect spreads.
Magnifies it much more.
Whereas happiness and positivity is much easier to do.
So avoiding those emotional vampires that are out there.
The drains.
Yes, the drains.
Sucking your happiness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all been in workplaces before where that's been something that you've had to navigate, and you know what it feels like, doesn't it, when you're with somebody who is giving out those negative vibes. It's not a good place to be.
It does, in fact, it does impact you, doesn't it? It does kind of bring you down. However kind of happy and kind of positive you are, it just brings the whole atmosphere down and just makes your day a little bit less, and you're just harder to get into everything and get going and get motivated. So it does make a big difference.
Definitely.
It's like carrying the weight of other people's burdens through a project is tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
If someone says they find something difficult, then you might not have found it difficult, but you start feeling a bit, it is quite hard, isn't it? It's quite tricky.
Exactly.
So, I thought it was an interesting thing you were saying earlier, Elliot, and this is kind of like the opposite point, isn't it, about the, if you're making more money, if you're making lots of profit, that must mean everyone's really, really, really happy. But I think we were seeing that, was it something in India?
Yes. I looked at a study in India. So over 12 years, they were looking at how their GDP grew.
Yeah.
And what they saw is, even though their GDP was going up and the country was making more money, they saw a fall in the country's happiness rating. This is that classic rating where Denmark and the Scandinavian companies are always absolutely smashing it, and India had seen a drop. So we can't always necessarily say that higher profits mean that people are generally happier.
Yeah.
And I suppose we can link that and perhaps back to business as well, and say that just because a business is doing super well doesn't mean necessarily that they've got happy employees, which means they could be vulnerable to attrition and retention problems because their company culture isn't as strongly developed.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I think that's interesting because you do think there is that often more money, and you've got to be happy if you've got money, you've got what you need. The company's doing well, but just that correlation isn't necessarily there. So it is, I think that point about India was really interesting.
And actually, and interesting, that sort of backs up some of the research we've done around, what's the return on investment on doing some of the more difficult work around helping increase engagement and bring in particular programs that help improve employee happiness, which might be things like coaching or good training or developing your leaders or making sure that all your policies are in place, all these things that support your people to work in a happy way. Why is that important? I guess that's the question a lot of business owners want answer, which is how much is it going to cost me? Is it going to make a difference to my business? And we often think of this in the context of what would be a typical example of one of our clients. So we work a lot with Microsoft partners, traditionally, small to medium enterprises. And we found that if we imagine that you're a Microsoft partner with about 50 people in, let's say you've got 50 people, you've got an average salary of around £45,000, and you've got an average attrition rate of about 16%, which is what we've been seeing at the back of the pandemic. And you've got a revenue of 5 million, so quite healthy revenue, and potentially a profit of 700 grand. So that gives you a kind of a rough overview of a small business. If you are losing 16% of your staff, for whatever reason that might be, that could be costing you up to 180 grand a year.
Wow.
Which is a big chunk of money.
That's a massive chunk.
Because you're losing people, you're losing their knowledge, you're losing their ability to bring business in. You're having to pay out recruiting costs, onboarding fees, obviously overheads of just having people, on benefits and setting them up, and having a space in the office. So all of the costs associated with losing somebody, which can be up to 2 times their salary, adds up if that's 16% of your staff over the year. So when you put that onto a profit line, you could potentially be saving about 5% on your profit if you start to invest in this. So what we're saying is we could come in and help you. We could try and reduce that cost by about 20%. That's going to give you a 5% saving on your profit line. So about 36 grand at the end of the year, in addition to that 700 grand you've already got. So if you, for example, wanted to invest in a coaching program that was going to cost you 5 grand to maybe help a couple of your leaders be better at what they do, in a small organisation that has a big impact. So that's where we start to see why this work makes sense, because it really does affect the bottom line at the end of the day.
That's amazing stats, isn't it? Really interesting information. That it's trying to say to yourself, isn't it, that if you invest now, it's how much you save. It's trying to work through that kind of the logic and the consequences of, if I lose people because they're not happy, what's the cost of that? And then so therefore it's worth investing in whatever that might be, whether it's coaching, etc. But to get that benefit, long-term benefit, and retaining people is just, it's just the right thing to do for your business all round, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I often get asked this question by business owners, well, what does this mean? How's it going to make a difference to the business ultimately? And you sometimes come across people who don't really buy in or don't understand how potentially this kind of work helps them. They might see it as fluffy or unnecessary or a bit kind of, touchy-feely. And actually, when you start to break it down and look at what does it actually mean to the bottom line, what's the impact it has on the wider population in the workplace in terms of overall productivity and performance, you can start to see that actually it's something that everybody should do, really.
It's kind of the hard facts and figures are backing up how important it is and what value it has. So it makes it more tangible, doesn't it, to people who don't really, as you say, see it a bit fluffy and think, well, how's this actually going to help? And you say, put all those facts together, you can see the financial value.
Yeah.
It really does. Yeah.
So I guess one of the things we've talked about a lot is, why have we even decided that this is important? We've obviously talked about, we know what the challenges are out there in the marketplace, we know what our clients are facing, and we know why it's important. and we know why it works. But we've done a lot of research in this space, haven't we? We've read lots of books, we've done a lot of research into the science of happiness, we've done our own research around what our Microsoft partners know. I guess it would just be helpful to talk about what it is that we individually have found really inspiring from some of this research, and why it is that we're talking about this topic today. Because we've got, two particular books that have really inspired us, haven't they, from this, which we've sent out in our book club to a number of clients. So we've looked at Delivering Happiness, which is a book by a guy called Tony Shea, and he talks about putting culture first and how important it is to make sure that your people are happy. And then we've also looked at the book Drive by Dan Pink, which is all about what makes humans motivated, so human motivation, and what do we need to do to encourage that in the workplace. I guess it just means to sort of get our individual takes on it, because everybody takes something away from these books that's a bit different.
Those books are really fascinating, and I can't remember which one of the books it was about, the shift of the change of what motivates people and how it's shifted over time. But I really kind of, what resonates with me is the fact of autonomy and the way you do things, how you do things, when you do things. That's really important to me. So that really resonates with me, that if that's something I can get from where I work, that I can, get some independence and get some kind of control over what I can do and how I do it and when I do it, that makes a massive difference to me, and it just feel kind of almost released and kind of free, much more free, and it's got to be better. Be better.
I think the most valuable things from the research was that it is that opportunity to go back to that basic question of, okay, where does happiness come from? Because if we can find the essence and the core of that, what makes it up, the structures and all that kind of stuff, then we can start to apply it to certain situations. So we could apply it to the, what's going on with Microsoft partners. So I found that was the most interesting thing for me from both books, is that both authors were trying to define what goes into it. So you had the 4 ingredients of happiness from Tony Heisch, which was perceived control, culture, connectedness, and vision. I think culture's like a big, massive one.
It is.
For us.
Culture.
Yeah, definitely.
A big difference.
It's that warm, like family feel.
Literally, it's like the feel good factor at work, rather than feeling kind of uncomfortable and you don't fit in. It's just feeling this is right, and I can relax with the people, and we've got common kind of values or common kind of things that we enjoy, or it just feels right, doesn't it? What about you, Lou? What did you like about the books, or what did you take one of your kind of key takeaways?
I think, building on that, I think it's about purpose. So how connected can you be to what it is that you do every day? So the more, passionate you feel about how you do your work, what you do, with the opportunities you have to deliver it in a way that you want to deliver it, the more motivated you are at the end of the day. Like, I know, I'm sure we've all been in jobs where that's not been possible to feel like that, because you've been a bit of a cog in a wheel, just delivering, and then you never really feel like you have control over how you're going to grow and progress, because you're just ticking boxes. That ultimately doesn't lead you to a good place of wanting to give more and be of more value to the company. So I think the world's changed now. A lot of companies are looking at this now, and they are realising the importance of needing to understand what their values are, needing to look at what individual people's values are, and how does that connect to what the purpose is of the company, so that people can feel like they are part of it. And we talked before in the last episode about the sort of two ways that we need to look at recognising people. So one was the financial piece, so we need to make sure that's all in place, and then the second piece is about, can people feel really purposeful and driven and enthusiastic in how they work? And I think that's the biggest takeaway I took from the Tony Heisch book, which is around connect people to the culture, get them bought in, help them, make them feel like they all own a bit of it and can craft it and be part of it, and they're all responsible for kind of sustaining it. So it's not just falling on the leader or the CEO to create this culture. It is a collective effort, isn't it? And then I think the piece in Dan Pink's book is really key, is about autonomy, like you said. So motivation, human motivation, comes from the desire to want to do better and be able to choose how you develop and grow. And if you're not too restricted on that, you're more likely to continue to grow. So I think those are the two kind of key pieces.
Yeah, purpose, definitely. I'm also seeing lots of people talking about mastery and becoming, I mean, there's tons of books about that you could read up on now, but it seems like a kind of, while all companies seem to be retreating back into themselves to build them up internally, I think that's rubbing off on individuals as well, that they suddenly want to become, masters of things and develop themselves, as opposed to, just easy more, more annual leave or more salary, that sort of thing.
Well, you think how good you feel if you've achieved something at work that's been your idea, or you've had a large part in it being your idea, and you've been allowed to run with it and try it out and take some risks and, really be the kind of owner of it. How motivating is that? Even if it doesn't necessarily become the next big thing, or it does, maybe it goes wrong, you've still had that opportunity to try. And we talk a lot about spaghetti and marshmallows, don't we, at Law 365? The idea of trying and failing fast and learning quickly and keeping going and never stamping out that kind of spark that we all have that as kids, don't we? To just try stuff and not get beaten down by it. But gradually, as we grow up, we get that squashed out of us.
You're frightened of failing, aren't you? You're frightened of getting it wrong and frightened of it not being the massive success. And you only feel you can, you don't, as you say, spaghetti and marshmallows, you don't want to dip your toe in case someone goes, oh, that's a bit rubbish, that didn't really work out. But it's that when I was looking the mastery thing you were talking about, and there were people talking about the flow state, which I hadn't really kind of understood, but then someone else described it as being totally absorbed in something.
Wait, so what's the flow
state? I bet Lou can tell us more about the flow state than I can. I just imagined it as absorption.
I've heard of it too.
Have you? Yeah.
So it's when you're doing something that you're completely and utterly absorbed in because you love it and you're passionate about it, and you're good at it. Doesn't require a huge amount of effort's the wrong word, but it's something that you're naturally really loving and enjoying, and you're good at it, and you're kind of unaware of everything else going on around you. So it's when you lose sense of time. So
that's it.
Maybe if you're a creative person, Elliot, you're quite creative. So maybe when you're writing, I don't know, or doing something creative, you might get a bit lost in your work, and that's an amazing feeling because you don't really realise what's going on, and you're really connected to it. Whereas perhaps if you're doing something that is harder for you or less interesting, or it's a chore, but it feels like a chore, it's much more. You're less motivated to do it, aren't you? You're more likely to put it off, procrastinate, put it down the list. So the more we can do work that puts us into flow, the more motivated we're going to be, and the better you're going to get out of people. So it's not always, in a corporate setting, getting that flow state can be things like just thinking about how and where you work. So what kind of work are you doing when? Is it focus time that you need? Or is it could be a really good meeting. It could be an amazing collaborative meeting that you're doing something and designing something together or having a conversation. Or it could be that you need to put yourself into a mindful state. Some people go into flow when they're just doing something really mindful that relaxes them. So it's different for everybody.
I think it must be difficult if you're an employer and it's getting into flow state is something so subjective that how can you have a perfect way to approach this for each person? Essentially, line managers will have to evolve and become coaches almost for their team.
So that's
as opposed to
stepping back probably a little bit and letting people decide a bit more for themselves, and have a little bit more freedom. I suppose that's the kind of almost the how, when and where. It's kind of letting people have that space to do something that they enjoy, and maybe even putting their hand up and saying, this is the kind of thing, can I get involved in that, because that's my kind of thing. And then they're happier, more content, and then hopefully more productive with the other things that are less interesting.
And I think it's working as an organisation to help connect people to why they're all there. So why are they all working for? Let's say, why does everybody work for Law 365? If you were to ask each person, you're going to get a different answer. People are aware of what the company's mission is, and we're all connected to that. But everyone individually will have their own take on that as well. And if they understand what that is, they're more likely to want to do more and work well as a team and feel connected to each other because they're working towards a bigger purpose. It's not just their job that they come to do to deliver every day. The more we can understand that we're all working to something bigger than ourselves. And that might be, for some people it might be that they come to work every day because they want to be able to, go on a nice holiday at the end of the year. But it might be more than that. It might be that they really love their team and they really want to be there to support everybody. It's not just delivering on their goals. And we find when people work in that way and are recognised for doing that, the outcome is that people would continue to do more rather than just, so Dan Pink calls it the carrot and stick effect, doesn't he? So if you just reward people with a bonus or, you know, a salary rise every year, nothing else in between, you ultimately don't get the same benefit long term. Yes, you need that, but you then need that motivating factor behind it, which is encouraging them to do things that really support their strengths, maybe encouraging them to try stuff out that they wouldn't already try. So if I guess a question for some of our clients is, do you have opportunities in the organisation to help people learn new skills and like cross-pollinate across departments and try stuff out? And there's this lovely idea of the squiggly career. There's a book out there called The Squiggly Career Book. And like, can you encourage people to squiggle around a bit rather than being in this linear
kind of,
depending on the profession, I suppose, but then they're more likely to gather more insights and knowledge on the way, and you're going to come out a more whole rounded, like I said, rounded person.
I think, and that's again part of that whole picture, isn't it, is also, although it's great to do something you really enjoy and you're good at, that's brilliant, but sometimes a bit of a little challenge thrown in there, that kind of pushing yourself a little bit, is also something that can be enjoyable and get you you into the flow state, absorbed. And I think there's all little bits that make up the whole picture, isn't it?
You want to be sort of gently stretched most of the time, not all the time, because then you'll end up being a bit too overstretched
and stressed.
And you don't want to be in your comfort zone all the time, because then you get bored and a bit apathetic about stuff.
You get stuck in a rut, don't you?
It's that idea then about this intrinsic, we call it intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, which I think is what Dan Pink is ultimately referring to. If you can get people to understand why they care about what they do, why they come to work, why do they like their team, why have they chosen that particular career, rather than I'm doing it because it gives me X salary at the end of the year or it gives me X number of holidays, it's much more meaningful in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any clients that you've worked with that you've worked on any of these kind of theories and some of these themes that come out of those books? Is there anything in particular that's come along when you've worked with clients that have helped when you've been working with clients?
Definitely. I think what I'm saying is this isn't new news for people, but what's interesting is they know it but they're not doing it. So why is it that it's hard to get this right? And it's often just time and headspace for leaders to sit back and think, how do we create really good, clear progression opportunities for people? And what do we need to do to make sure that's actually happening? So have they got really good, especially with Microsoft partners, they're often coming from a place of being a startup, they're business owner led. They may never have worked for anybody else before, so they don't necessarily have the experience of knowing how to set up really good KPIs or OKRs these days, and how do you have really good objectives behind that? So how do you make sure that your people have got a clear sense of what it is they need to do to achieve mastery, and how they're going to be rewarded for that, and how the team's going to be collectively rewarded for that. So they just need time and headspace often to think about how to craft this that's right for their organisation. So they kind of know that this is important. It's not quite been put into practice because it's just, it's the sort of thing that takes second place when the business is growing. But then you get to a certain point where you absolutely have to have this so that the culture's right. And so people can feel rewarded and happy. Because then
there's a missing, you realise something's missing, don't you? And that's probably when they sit back and take the time to think a bit and think what's missing here. And it's about, what can I do to make sure people are progressing through their career? What KPIs and
OKRs, objective and key results. It's much more aligned to what are the objectives that people need to achieve as a team and as a collective, rather than this big kind of one sort of overhead of what the company needs to achieve. It makes it more personal, connected to the people, I think, rather than just a company-wide one. Perhaps when you do employment policies and contracts, this is something that we're starting to build in, isn't it? Like connecting companies to their values and the purpose, so that it becomes more of a
it's part of what we're I mean, Elliot and I are working on culture guides and handbooks and policies at the moment, and we're trying to build in, aren't we, the visions, and we kind of, our starting point is to speak to the Microsoft partners and understand from them, what are the visions and values and your company has, what's important to your company and your staff. So we're trying to get that as an upfront piece of information to then build in as we're building the policies to filter that through, because the clients we work with have strong kind of feelings and views of what type of company they want to be, how they want to portray themselves. So then that's what we try and build in. And it's particularly been working on culture guides, haven't you?
Yeah, I think one of the difficulties though is that employment law and HR processes have been built and developed on this very regimented, almost automaton style way that the processes go step to step. If it's we're talking about like performance, that sort of thing, so that is very much you start a performance improvement plan and then you move along the steps and then you hopefully get to the other end, but it's kind of got this undercurrent of how can we work through the steps in order to essentially fire someone. The idea of giving someone purpose wasn't necessarily built into this. So it's not so much an improvement plan, it's more like how can we get someone offboarded as quickly as possible, how can we fire someone essentially. That's I think one of the struggles is that these processes as they are now were built not at the idea of purpose and all that kind of stuff wasn't a thing. So I think that's one of the difficulties that we're faced with.
It's a conflict, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a conflict with those things. Yeah, employment has its not so happy side as well. But and we're certainly in the kind of kinder, nicer policies, as it were, where we're trying to kind of support, draft up to support employees. Then we're trying to build in those kind of visions and values a bit more, and trying to penetrate and spread that out so that employees feel they understand what the company's about and that they're supported. But yes, there's still that conflict with on the flip side, the less happy side. So it is kind of hard to build in those kind of themes into the performance management plan, for example.
That's why it's been such an exciting challenge, I think, for us to go through all this research and discover these new ideas and ideals. It's been great.
It's like flipping it on its head a little bit, isn't it? It's about, in a way, for lots of leaders, it's about letting go of control a little bit and allowing your people to shine and try things out and be a bit more autonomous, not obviously ignoring things when they go completely wrong or if somebody's not in the right role, but just taking a slightly different viewpoint, which is, can you trust them? You've taken the time and effort to hire somebody for what they're good at. Can you trust them to try and show that is what they're great at without micromanaging and needing to put all these processes and controls in place? People still need a sense of direction and where they're going, and they need to know what they can achieve, but not such a rigid process. And also what we suggest is these conversations should be happening all the time. It shouldn't be a once a year performance review.
That's the
every
worst,
week, every month. You should never be surprised about the feedback that you get from your managers. It should be a culture where everybody's open and constantly being challenged in a good way, supported and challenged. But these conversations, like I think you said earlier, Elliot, about they need to be having coaching conversations every day, so that the culture is that people feel open and trusted to try things.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't we were going to talk about some productivity stats, weren't we, and some information about why is it better in terms of happy workers are being more productive. And there was this thing you found, wasn't it, Elliot, about contact centres, British Telecom, BT. They did some research and said that when workers are happier, they work faster by making more calls per hour worked and convert more calls to sales. And it's just they don't work longer hours. It's not, they don't have to do 10 more hours to get the kind of get through those calls more, get those calls converted into sales. It's just about being, you know, more productive when they're actually at work. Because again, that's what, you know, again with work-life balance and trying to, you know, encourage that within organisations. We don't want employees, you know, working 10 hours to achieve the same that they could. It's about, you know, being happier, isn't it? And that then leads to definite better employee satisfaction, better productivity. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, because when you're doing something that you love, like we're going back to that flow thing, I'm sure we've all experienced it, but you don't mind how long it takes.
Yeah.
Or you might be really into it. You might want to actually invest more time in it, but that is part of doing what you love.
Yeah.
So it's just having that mindset of trying to do stuff that's, you know, more meaningful to you.
So we were talking about productivity and about investing in employees. So if you invest in the employees' happiness, your productivity and profits increase. So it's kind of, what do you do to invest in employees' well-being? What's kind of thoughts? What's the best way forward?
Yeah, because we've been talking about concepts, really. How do we put that into something into practice? Exactly.
Yeah, what will our clients actually want to take away and do with this? So I think some of the key things are actually not too big. Like when we talked before about having a good culture, having a culture of openness and transparency. So do people feel like they can go and have good conversations with managers? So being open, having good conversations that just check in and say, how are you doing today? And for managers and leaders, every week, you know, how do you structure your one-to-ones? Can you have really good one-to-one meetings with people that are not just about your to-do list? Are they about, you know, how's that person feeling? How are they going on at home? How are they juggling things? Are they excited about their work that they're doing? Are there other things they can be doing that, you know, might help them feel more passionate about what they're doing? So I think just setting up the culture where those conversations are encouraged and rewarded and role modelled by senior members of the team, so that it's not this sort of closed door policy of wait for your review and then you kind of build up a sense of tension and worry about how it might go. If that's happening all the time, you're more likely to get a better culture around that.
Yeah, feels less of a big deal, as you say, to have these regular kind of conversations. It just makes everyone feel a bit more relaxed, more connected, more understanding. Like you touched on home responsibilities. You don't talk to people on a daily basis. How do you know what's going on behind the doors, behind the scenes of their workplace, where they're you know, trying to get on with things? All of that puts it in context and just makes it, you know, as you say, better culture, more connected. And I think from the perspective of clarity, we're talking about clarity in the policies and you know, making, if you're transparent and clear in policies, what makes people feel comfortable is knowing where they stand and what's available, what support's available, or what a process might be. So I think and if those policies, those employment policies are clearly set out, then that's part of it's all part of the picture, isn't it? The check-ins, you know, clear policies, make this whole picture that works better for employees.
Also, if like productivity is down or someone's doing something, you know, they're underperforming, then I suppose like feedback is like you know, how do you give that feedback without putting them down? How do you essentially say they're doing it wrong, but then lift them up as well to keep them motivated? How do you do that?
Well, I guess that comes back to the idea that it shouldn't be a surprise. So if you can be constantly giving feedback, good and constructive, then the conversations naturally flow all the time about this kind of thing. So rather than saving up and worrying about giving a bit of negative feedback, if it's constantly being checked and you're constantly having those good meetings and good conversations, hopefully that eliminates some of the, you're not going to get rid of it completely, are you? But it might eliminate some of the kind of surprises that might come from traditional
once a
firms.
year. Which when it does come as a big shock, and that's just no good, because someone might have been harbouring this thing they wanted to tell you for 5 months, and you thought everything was fine. Suddenly they spring it on you. But if they told you straight away and had a whole discussion with each other, it kind of just deflates the whole kind of big deal about it, doesn't it? And also that's been then 5 months of you not doing it right, potentially, or not knowing. If you were told straight away, it just makes it just kind of calms the whole thing down into less of a big problem, and it's just it's just a kinder way of approaching things.
I think it comes from having a high trust culture. So if you've got a good culture where people practice this, they listen well, they show empathy, they trust each other to give good feedback, because ultimately giving good feedback creates trust, whether it's, you know, especially constructive stuff, because you're constantly improving people, and rather than hiding things and sitting on things. So I think that idea of how you set yourself up, how does the culture reflect that, is really important. And one of the other things we've talked about with clients before is have a bit of fun with it. So do some workshops around creating your company values, like get people bought into this. Like, can you have a conversation around what everybody's values are? Let's find out where we're similar, where we're different. Let's create some, fun around what those mean to us. How do we want to talk about these to other people? So that it becomes a language that everyone's using. Or the same with the culture, but you could interview all your staff and ask them to maybe share what they think the culture is, and then build up a collection of stories around it.
Yeah, I'm liking that idea. Some quotes from your employees in your culture guide of this is what this company means to me, or this is what I like in what I find a good place to work. I'm thinking that's an idea for us, for our culture guides.
Yeah, excellent.
Get everyone, note that one down.
Exactly. And can you imagine, you've worked in organisations before where you've been told, here are the company values, you must live by them. Yeah. And you look at them and you think, they mean nothing to me.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can, if you're a small enough organisation, and certainly in a high growth company that we work, lots of companies we work with are in this stage of doing this, you're in a perfect opportunity to craft out something that really matters to people. So have some fun with it. I think that's the key. Make it happy.
Always make it happy and shiny.
Excellent. So I guess the idea here then is that companies that prioritise employees' well-being. Companies that prioritise employees' well-being are going to see greater productivity and profits. That's kind of the key theme here, isn't it, really? Yeah. So what would you say out of everything we've talked about today are your sort of key things that you would go off and do, or make a difference to what you do, or talk to your clients about from today?
I'm gonna take the good one. I'm gonna say purpose today has been the best one to talk about and think of, because you see so many people who've done amazing things for no money, and they do it because they've got that drive, they've got that purpose, and they've found that in the work that they do. So I think that's what I'm going to take away from this.
Excellent. I love that.
I kind of I'm just flipping between autonomy and mastery, but because I liked our chat about the being totally absorbed in something you're doing. I think that's such a nice feeling when you obviously don't realise you're there going
flow state.
Exactly. I think that's really, really lovely. If you can give people the freedom, to be able to do some things that they might enjoy, that it's not necessarily they say micromanage, it's just something that they choose to do and they get into the flow state. I think that's great.
Yeah, brilliant.
What about you?
I think I'm going to take away the culture book piece, because we've been looking at doing that, and I think it'd be really fun to actually get that rolling. Yeah,
I like that. Brilliant.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. So there you have it. If you, our listeners or viewers, have any comments, thoughts, surprises, delights you'd like to share, just drop us an email or a comment. And thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. It's been good.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks.